Howdy, howdy. This is Mr. Potter. What I want to do today is kind of talk about how we're going to get started with this fraction program. So at this point, you should have your forms set up. You should have 4 text fields, and they should be labeled text 1, text num1, text num2, text den1, text den2, just to indicate numerator and denominator. You should have 4 labels. One label which reflects your equal sign, one label that's going to be the answers numerator and answers denominator, and one label that'll just be whatever sign that we're going to be putting in the operation. And you should have 5 buttons, one for addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and a button to clear. So what I want to do is I want to talk about how we actually set up one of our operations. And I'm going to go through the entire process for the addition button. In other words, how we get the information from the text fields, how we actually process it to create a number that's a numerator and denominator, how we use the GCD method that we talked about in class to find the greatest common divisor so that we can reduce our fraction, and how to put our answer in the labels for numerator and denominator. So I'm going to start by double-clicking on the plus sign. That's going to get me to the code for btn plus click. Now this is what happens. This code gets executed every time I click that button in my program. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to set up the sign, because in my design I've got a space for the sign that's going to be set up. So I'm going to want this label sign to have its text changed to an actual plus sign. So when I double click on this plus sign, I want to set this up so that LBL sign dot text gets a plus sign. So that's the first thing that I want to do. The second thing I want to do is I want to get the data from the text boxes. So in my form, I've got a numerator and denominator. So this numerator, the text box is txt num1, and the denominator is txt den1. So I'm going to get the information from that to set up my first fraction. So my numerator, I'm going to get that by taking int.parse the information that's in txt num1, the text field for that. And I'm going to do the same thing for den1. I'm going to do that for the text field for the denominator 1. So that's for the first fraction. I'm going to do the same thing for the second fraction. So num2 gets int.parse parse txt num2.text, and int den2 is going to get int.parse txt den2.text. So at this point, I've gotten all the information out of those four text fields. So now I can actually manipulate them to figure out a common denominator. So first thing I need to do is remember when we talked about finding a common denominator. We did that by finding the first denominator and multiplying it by the second denominator. And then to find the numerator, I'm going to take the first numerator times the second denominator, essentially cross multiplying. And I'm going to add that to numerator 2 times den 1. So I've cross multiplied the numerators and added them together to get the numerator for the sum. And my common denominator is just the product of the two denominators. So at this point, I need to reduce. Now, in the chapter 4 or the chapter 3 book, page 54, there was a section of code. This code actually finds the GCD using the method that we've talked about in class. And at this point, I really don't need to know how it works, but we know we worked through several examples in class that showed the process. We haven't talked about the while loop yet, but while just basically runs a series of steps until a certain objective is achieved. We're going to keep running this as long as my remainder wasn't 0. And as soon as my remainder was 0, that last number that we divided by ended up being our GCD. This is the Euclidean algorithm. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to paste it just above my button plus clicks. So I'm going to tab this over, and I'm going to paste it here. And just to make this pretty, I'm going to tab this over so that it's formatted similar to the way that our process is. Notice none of the code here has changed. I've just changed the spacing so that it's aligned properly. And I need this, but instead of using dividend and divisor, I want to use these two values that we have, my common number, my common denominator, and my new numerator. So I need to create, okay, what we just did is we just added the fractions together. And what I want to do now is I want to reduce the fraction. So the first thing I'm going to do is find a common denominator. And this is going to be equal to GCD for my common denominator and my new numerator. Now, you don't have to worry about getting these in a particular order. The program is going to work exactly the same if I do new numerator, common denominator. The reason is because when I do the division, one way the division is going to have a quotient of 0, with the remainder being the actual number itself, and so it ends up just swapping those numbers for us. So the order really doesn't matter. It's going to keep going until I have a divisor of 1, and in that case I'm going to have my GCD. So once I found my greatest common divisor, I need to reduce. And remember, in order to reduce, I'm going to take my common denominator and I'm going to divide it by my GCD. So I'm using the divide equals operator, the unary operator. And I'm going to do the same for my new numerator. So it's going to be divided by my GCD as well. Now, once I've done this, my fraction is reduced because I've divided by the greatest common divisor. So now there's no common factor between my numerator and denominator. Now I'm ready to put the answer in the labels. So I had two labels. I had the label, it was LBL and num, that's the answer numerator, and I want to set its text to my new numerator. It's toString. Remember, I'm going to use the toString in order to convert my integer to a string in order to be able to put it in the text field, which requires a string. I could do concatenation. I'm not doing any of the fancy formatting that we talked about, like with the currency. I'm not going to use the quote C flag in there. I'm just converting it to a string. And I want to do the exact same thing to LBL answer denominator. So that's going to get common den dot toString. And so what we've done at this point is we've set up the label in between our buttons. We've got the information from our text fields. We've physically added the fractions together. Now these numbers are big numbers at this point. We've reduced the fraction by finding the GCD and then dividing the numerator and denominator by those values. And then we put the answer in our label. So what I want to do now is I want to try and run this program. Hopefully I've got no errors. I don't. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 1/2, and I'm going to add it to 1/3. And I know that 1/2 plus 1/3 is 5/6, so I should get that. And notice that I do get that ratio of 5/6. So I can try this again. So I'm going to try 3/4 plus 1/4, and that should be 4/4, but when I physically go about hitting the plus sign, it should reduce to 1/1. So what I have now is I have a fully working addition button. Now, if I want to get my subtraction button to work, there's only one change that I have to make here. And the idea is that if I double click on this to get my subtraction button to go, almost this entire section can be copied. Only one thing has to be changed. And I'll let you figure what that is. So this is Mr. Potter. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.